Guys, what is going on? My name is Jonathan. This is Comic Book Cinema, where we bring you the best comic book movie content. Today, I'm joined by three wonderful guests. Timothy Collins, take it away.
I met Jonathan on a show for the M6P. We've hooked up together a couple times ever since. The rest is history. Now
I
we're best
also
friends.
forced you to watch the Nick Fury movie with David Hasselhoff.
Oh
Remember
man,
that?
don't get me started on that one, man. You're lucky you're all the way over in Oregon still, man. I would have tracked you down for that one.
And Mr. Isak, he has a following on TikTok. He does all the socials, and he just forayed recently into YouTube. What's up, Isak?
How you doing? Having a great day? Happy to be on.
And Mr. Danny O'Mani, he's got some very hilarious content on TikTok. Do yourself a favor, check him out. What's up, Danny?
Hey, thanks for having me on. And I think I am going to have to see this Nick Fury movie. I heard of it. I'm going to try to find it on Amazon now. I
It's
don't
on
care how bad
YouTube
it
for
is.
free. It's on YouTube for free.
Oh,
That's
I'm
how
watching
bad it is.
I'm watching it. Consider that thing. That's going to be something I'm going to check out.
It was a made-for-TV film, and Tim Collins and I, with some other guests, might or might not have done a review for it on this channel. So
I'll have
if you
to
want
look
to check that out after
It was
you watch
bad.
it,
It was bad, man.
the movie was almost torture. Let's just leave it at that. Today, we are going to discuss the multiverse concept in the current MCU. Is it a bad thing? What does it lead to? Even in the DC universe, I think that they're starting to flirt with that idea a bit. So we're going to discuss all things multiverse today on this episode. I think that it's very fitting that I'll let Mr. Tim Collins start off on the multiverse. Tim, try not to speak about this for more than 8 minutes straight, okay? Try to keep it brief.
All right.
I know you have a lot of thoughts, so hit us with your best shot.
I do, and they're very passionate thoughts. Okay, I want everyone to understand just a couple things can be true at once. Okay, I can absolutely hate the concept of the multiverse for a variety of reasons, but I can still enjoy storylines within the multiverse. When I tell you that I still enjoyed some of the storylines that have to do with the multiverse, that's not me contradicting myself. Okay, I just want to throw that out there because I did enjoy No Way Home. I did enjoy Multiverse of Madness. There's a lot of that stuff. That being said, the multiverse itself has always kind of been a concept to me that does a variety of things that I don't like. And that's kind of why it's not my favorite. I would prefer just one linear story with a beginning and an end and then do hard reboots. I would prefer a dozen of those to just doing the multiverse over and over and over again. Because what the multiverse kind of gives you is it kind of gives you that feeling that we're just not letting it go. We're going to keep this storyline going cyclical. It's like the old soap operas where they kill the guy off, but then the guy comes back as his evil twin brother and all that. It's all that kind of stuff is kind of what they end up doing with the multiverse. The stories get so convoluted. They get so confusing. They're so hard to follow. You can't really figure out who's supposed to be where. And that's kind of by design. And then the other thing that they do with it is it just makes for lazy writing. And they kind of end up saying, well, we can just explain all of this via multiverse if there are inconsistencies, which I don't like. Okay. I don't like when they just say, oh, well, what ended up happening in the MCU, for example, is they started coming up with all these crazy reasons that didn't make sense for why we hadn't seen characters before. The Deviants told us that we couldn't do anything. And Ms. Marvel, 4 emergencies.
Yeah, but I don't think that has anything to do with multiverses, though.
But what I'm saying is the multiverse is going to take those and say, now the multiverse is going to be able to say, well, these characters weren't here, but it's because they were in a different universe. Okay. So I understand why they're doing it, but that doesn't mean that I have to be a fan of it. So I just think that there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be problems. And one of the things in cinema that's going to be completely different than when they did this in the comic books is now it's going to be an excuse for casting discrepancies, which casting discrepancies are one of my biggest pet peeves. No, Terrence Howard and Don Cheadle are not the same person, okay? Nobody can ever try to convince me that it was a good decision to not be able to do it. But that's the thing. Now the studio has all the leverage over the actor, which it was the other way around. And if they just want to reintroduce the character and explain it via multiverse, that's what they're going to do. This is a slippery slope that can lead to a lot of things like that, which is why I don't like it. That's just kind of me keeping it short. Believe me, I could pontificate on this for like an hour and a half. Ultimately, there's just a lot of things that I think could be potential problems.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that It allows us as an audience to see stuff that we never could have seen before. Had it not been for the multiverse, we never would have got to see Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all together on the same screen. I love stuff like that. I eat it up. Some of the fan service type stuff that we get in the MCU films is almost like, but some of it, like even the Illuminati, I just ate that up.
Yeah.
I loved it. I'm still rooting that or hoping that we can see Hugh Jackman's Wolverine just one more time. That's all I want to see. Just come back one more time for like a brief 5 minutes, and then we can introduce the new X-Men. I don't think they're going to do that, but I'm all for stuff like that. So I guess I'm on the team of multiverse.
I like it. Like, I'm with you on that side, that I think that it's exciting. Like, when I saw Toby, Andrew, and Tom all in the same movie, and you see Alfred Molina, you see Willem Dafoe, you see Jamie Foxx, you see, I can't think of the Sandman actor's name, but you see all
Thomas
these.
Hayden Church.
Yeah, you see all these guys come together in movies that have meant a lot to you, and to see them all come together, it was so enjoyable. So that was one way that it was explained, and that was one way that it was enjoyed. And Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, again, seeing a different universe. Like, I wish they would explore that universe a little bit more that they went to, like with Reed and with
more universes.
Yeah, let's develop that a little bit. Maybe that's where Doctor Doom could be from. Maybe and I think practically, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to have like a backup plan too, and it does help kind of like solve. I know it does make for lazy writing, and also it takes out the whole casting idea where people then the studio has leverage over the actor. But it also is to keep it to where it doesn't feel like it's a continuity error, but it's a way to kind of overshadow that too. Like, say, like you have a Robert Downey Jr. and so then somebody else comes in then to play him. So it's not like, oh, he comes back from the dead. No, this is a Iron Man from a different universe and things like that. I think that's good, but I think one of the things I don't like about it is I think it's overdone. Like the whole Flash Crisis thing that they had on the CW or whatever.
Yep.
Crisis on Infinite Earths.
To me, the whole idea was cool. You had different Flashes, you had different Batmans, you had different Supermans. If I'm not already involved in that, I stayed away from it because it just like it was a lot, and it was very, like Tim said, very confusing and frustrating to kind of like, it's like, okay, where do I even begin to get into this? Whereas, I was already established at Marvel, so it was something on top of it all that I was like, hey, this is fun and this is enjoyable. And I think too, it does help explain, because I was thinking about this, like with the X-Men, like when the X-Men come in, it's like, have they been here the whole time? I feel like it is at least going to help us not have to go to the whole eternal circular thing. It's like, where were you guys when Thanos was here? Yeah. So then you could say, well, I wasn't even here. Who's that? Or in my world, we didn't have that. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do, but that at least helps explain, so we don't have to have every different like new group that comes in. Oh, the Inhumans. It's like, oh, well, where were you guys? It's like, well, they were on the moon. But so they might not have cared as much. There's just so many different groups. At least it could help explain why they weren't there in the main story when something as cataclysmic as Thanos eliminating half the universe happened. So I think there's good things. I think there's bad things. But I think it's going to be fun. Like just the way that they teased with it, with the Multiverse of Madness, that was a lot of fun. And I'm excited for the storyline that they're bringing it into with the multiverse, with the incursions. Is that what they are?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm excited for those because I really love those stories in the comic books, and I'm excited to see all that play out on the big screen. I know they're not going to do it exactly like it, but I know it does involve the multiverse, and it is something that I think it's going to be fun.
I lean way more towards Tim. Like I'm not a fan of like the multiverse concept. I think that it's done well sometimes. I think that like alternate Earths are done well sometimes, like Flashpoint, for example. I thought that was really interesting. But I just think that it takes all of the tension out of the story for me. Let's look at like the Illuminati's death. There's no consequences really. We just had this crazy adventure and all this crazy stuff happened. None of it really matters. Like nothing. The only difference that we had from the beginning of Doctor Strange to the end is that Doctor Strange has now moved on from his ex, and America Chavez is training to be a wizard. And Wanda might be dead. When it comes to like the actual impact that it has on the universe, the Multiverse of Madness, I think definitely should have had something more. And I think that like a lot of people give like Marvel Studios too much credit. Like Kevin Feige, And like a lot of other people have come out and said that they literally just figure things out on the way. I think that they do a great job of that, especially like No Way Home. A lot of that movie was reshot, and I think that it came out and it was incredible. There are people who believe that like they're like Kevin Feige's like a mastermind who like plans like 10 years in advance, and like these are all
He's right
just
there.
steps on the way.
He's hosting this show. He's hosting this show right there.
but like they figure it out on the way, and I didn't like how they dealt with the multiverse and What If. Like you were making reference to like Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths and What If literally have the same exact plot. It's like, oh, I need like Uatu the Watcher was literally the he's the monitor. The Watcher and the Monitor.
I was thinking,
And
I was like, ugh.
like the Watcher and the Monitor are like, oh my god, there's this crazy threat that I need to assemble the best of the very best in the multiverse. And then they bring together Party Thor and the other the gang from What If, and like on the CW it's like, yeah, these are the best of the best in the established multiverse, which counts everything. And so we need like Batwoman and like, you know, the Flash from the CW. Like that's I just don't buy it, because like I read these comic books who have significantly better iterations, and if you're telling me that this comic book exists in this vast multiverse that this movie exists in, I just can't look at it justifiably and say like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely the best that they have to offer. I like when multiversal stories lead to like destruction and the devastation of the multiverse, which is why I liked the Secret Wars storyline and the I think it was it Hickman, Jonathan Hickman's Avengers run leading up to it,
Time runs
because
out.
it was like, yeah, like, hey, the multiverse is ending. Good. Let's end it. Like let's just end it. I feel like the multiverse being introduced, like let's say Infinite Crisis, I believe, was the one that reintroduced the multiverse into the DC universe. After that, there were multiverse storylines. Like they gave credence and justified the existence of the multiverse. And then years later, they condensed the multiverse again, and now it's back. I feel like the MCU introduced the multiverse just to destroy it, because like that's what's gonna happen. That's what Secret Wars is. They're gonna condense all these different Earths. I have no excitement for it, because I'm like, okay, it's gonna end. I'm not gonna like, you know, be super invested in it, because the point of its inception is for it to die. Like that's really what they're telling us. And every single person who knows anything about Marvel for years now has been saying, oh yeah, they're leading up to Secret Wars. We all know there's no tension. I'm really excited for the possibility of some X-Men world, like, you know, combining with the main world that we follow, like the 1610 did with the 616 in the comics, because like at that point they can say, oh yeah, the X-Men have always been here. Like they could just retcon the X-Men's existence in the universe, and then they don't have to
Yeah.
really worry about like explaining like, oh yeah, they weren't here for Thanos. Like, yeah, they were. You guys just didn't see it, because like the movies you watched took place in like the pre-retcon era, but they were definitely here. And like and that's fine. Like I think that it takes a very specific kind of writer to handle multiverse stories well, like Mark Waid. Great multiverse writer. More often than not, it just becomes a chaotic mess. Like I'm a huge fan of Scott Snyder's Batman. I'm a huge fan of him at DC. Dark Knight's Metal was it was a mess of a multiverse. It was just a lot thrown in your face, and like things that are cool in concept turned all the way up to 15, and like so much of it at the same time. Like it just felt very messy. I think that with the right person behind the wheel, a multiverse story could be great, but it
like
requires a
like
lot
Kevin
of attention.
Feige.
Yeah, I have faith in him.
Are
I
you
have faith in
listening
Kevin
to a
Feige's
word he
ability.
said? Kevin Feige is the guy. Were
Like
you
I
listening
have
to
faith
what
in.
he said?
I don't care
have
what
faith in
anybody
Kevin
says.
Feige.
I don't care what Tim says. I don't care what Isak. I don't care what anybody says. Kevin Feige has got a 5-year plan, not a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan. Yes, I'm sure that they do make some on-the-fly changes when they're writing and shooting the movie and things of this nature. And hey, it would be really cool if we could just add this little joke in here, and then occasionally we get some improv from actors like Robert Downey Jr., things like that. Yeah, sure. But ultimately, the roadmap is laid. And I think that's another reason why we haven't gotten the X-Men yet, why we haven't gotten the Fantastic Four yet. Go crazy with it. Go crazy. That's what I say. Go crazy, go nuts. Give us the X-Men from the Fox universe. Give us, like you said, as long as everything makes sense and it works out well, you know, which I think I trust Kevin Feige. You know, maybe I'm not necessarily a Marvel fanboy, but I'm a Feige fanboy. I'm a true believer in what he has accomplished. I mean, literally, think about this for a second. All the other studios that have tried to jump on this success wagon that Kevin Feige has almost single-handedly created, they haven't been able to replicate it, not in the least. The best example that I can give you is DC. And look how their universe is doing right now. They never even had origin stories for, well, they had one for Superman. They never had one for Batman or Aquaman or the Flash. Well, Aquaman came after the Justice League, but you see what I'm saying? Like, they basically gave us their Justice League with 2 movies before it, one of them being Batman versus Superman. Their movies, like, critically and box office wise, haven't even come close to the MCU. And you look at franchises like Fast and Furious, which is kind of rare that you have something that, they drop a few movies like in the early 2000s, and then years later they start making more and more. And as they make more, it gets more and more successful. Look at the Dark Universe from Universal. You had, Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe and Johnny Depp. They had all these big name actors. They were going to give us the Monster Universe. And you saw what happened with that. The very first movie, The Mummy, that came out bombed, and there was no other movies. I think that Kevin Feige is a very wise person. He's made some decisions that aren't the greatest, but overall, I still trust Kevin Feige because at the end of the day, he's still the person that gave me Avengers Infinity War, guys. One of the most epic, amazing superhero films of all time. And it was so meaningful because all those movies, I'm knocking my microphone over, all those movies that came before it, and built the building blocks towards that for each and every character. We knew about, Wanda. We knew about Captain America. We knew about Iron Man. All these characters, we knew, what their personalities were. And whenever we got to see them play together in the same sandbox for the first time, it was just so exciting. Yes, I trust Kevin Feige still. I think that a lot of the issues that Marvel's had as of late are not necessarily his fault. And honestly, if he could clone himself, I think he should do that.
I think that you're giving Feige a little too much credit for being the guy that's carrying the football. Like, don't get me wrong, you still have to run it over the goal line. I get that. The build up to the first Avengers story is the one that I think everybody thinks of when they think of the MCU success, right? Having introduced all of the whole Infinity Saga, of course. But the build up to that first Avengers movie and then the natural branches that came off of it, what really ended up being a success is kind of what was a natural progression from a studio that finally decided to take its time and do a good investment in these movies. And a lot of other studios decided to do it, but couldn't really carry through, didn't really have the patience, didn't really have the budget, didn't really have the following. And they also just didn't get the support that they ultimately thought they were going to get in order to stick with those projects. So that's the reason that you have a lot of those other universes fall apart. It's not necessarily that Feige was this brilliant mastermind. It's that he just kind of happened to be the guy in charge. That's the way I view it. And the reason I view it that way is because a lot of what we're seeing in phase 4 is what we really see as important to Kevin Feige. And it's a drastically underwhelming phase. I think we all can agree on that. If Feige really was this brilliant mastermind, he wouldn't be focusing on all this subprime nonsense. Okay. He would be focusing on this A-list, top shelf stuff, or at least giving us a good build up to it. Right now, I just don't see it. And it's not that it's
what
not
about the Guardians though? You remember Guardians of the Galaxy before came out?
It was a brilliant introduction. I'll give you that. You that.
Well, that's James Gunn though. That's James Gunn. He made Peacemaker good.
Well,
but not only that, that
made it work well within the concept of the Infinity Saga. Okay, that weaved very well within how else were you going to introduce Thanos into this universe where we pretty much only had worlds that had been introduced, not anything in space. It wove really well with the Infinity Saga, but just because everything kind of came to a natural end with the compilation movies in the Avengers doesn't necessarily mean that Feige's some brilliant genius. That's kind of where I disagree with you, Jonathan, and that's why when it comes to this concept of the multiverse and saying that we trust Kevin Feige with it, I mean, we're starting to see the direction he wants to go with the multiverse. And it's all of this stuff that kind of gets us scratching our head saying, what is he doing? Kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's not like when it's
part of the plan.
So I don't think that Kevin Feige is like a super genius.
The plan, right? Eventually you have to get to the plan. That's the problem.
So I don't think he's like a super genius by any means. I just think that like Kevin Feige is the only person who has been put in charge of a franchise that actually cares about the content. Like he is passionate about Marvel, and he's good at his job. And when you combine those two things, he's going to produce some really great content. And I think
And
that
don't
that's
forget
DC's biggest problem.
his vast amount of experience that he had before he even started the MCU.
Exactly. Like
he was involved in all those crappy Fox projects like the Fantastic Four and then the Spider-Man, the older Spider-Man films. He was there. He was right next to Avi Arad, becoming the young, the grooming the apprentice. You know what I'm saying? Like he has experience that's just invaluable, especially now at this point.
All these studios getting in the way has always been the problem. Okay,
exactly.
He's
and I think that's the biggest.
Drew the line in the sand. He's the first guy that drew the line in the sand, and that's good. That's good. But that doesn't mean just because things came to a natural end that he's some kind of genius. He's a good guy, and he's put together the Infinity Saga is the best comic book series that's been put together so far. I don't necessarily know that he's 100% the reason for that.
Kind of going along with what Tim said, where just kind of touching on that, where he said, why is he not using these A-listers and things like that? To me, I guess when I remember when the Infinity War first, or like the Avengers first came out and things like that, people considered, before like the Avengers got popular, I don't know about you guys, but they were not considered like Marvel's A-list team. You know, I don't think they were necessarily somebody that like everybody, because it was, who was it? It was the X-Men. I mean, and then, you know, they kind of rebranded it because of Fox and everything, and because of all the fiascos with that, and they wanted to.
You remember they kill all the X-Men storyline in the comics?
They did.
Yeah,
no more mutants, and they got rid of them all and stuff like that. So then they started building in and things like that. So he made a B-list team. I mean, because the Avengers were kind of I know growing up for me in the '90s, the Avengers were an afterthought. You know, it's like I was all about X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, Uncanny X-Men, and just taking all that, going through that. When there would be a tie-in with the Avengers, fine, I'll look at them. But it's like, but then even after like getting into the comic books, after the Avengers came out, they took, where suddenly Iron Man became an interesting character, Captain America became an interesting character. All these, you know, where before they were decent, and I don't know if Kevin had a hand in that. I guess maybe that's what he's trying to do now, where he's got some of these less than amazing characters where it's like, you know, you do have these characters that he knows are going to be successful, but he's trying to build a big universe, and he does have a plan where it's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. I mean, like we saw in the conference or Hall of H last night, or it's going to go out for a little while, at least a couple of years, where he does at least have some sort of a plan. So hopefully that's what he's doing, is like, or even like Guardians of the Galaxy. Before, I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy first came out, I could have cared less about it. And that was the first Marvel movie that I did not want to see in the theater, because I was like, that sounds like stupid to me. And because I just didn't know anything about it. And then when I actually got into it and I saw it, I was like, why did I not go see this in the theater? I almost like this better than the Avengers. And I was just waiting for more. And then Volume 2 came out. I loved it. And he took, so I think one of the things that I do like, and if Kevin had a hand in that, which I do think he had a hand in it to a certain degree, he made characters that I kind of liked into characters that I absolutely love. And he made it more enjoyable, and he made the comic book experience more lovable for me as well.
Yes.
That's something where I can give him that. And so hopefully that's what he's doing with some of these characters that he's bringing out now. That's my hope, at least.
Nobody loved Iron Man until post 2008.
I am much more of a DC guy than Marvel. Like I have 90% of the comics I own are DC. DC creating a successful Justice League. I think that's what makes it so difficult. We all know who Superman is. We each have our own interpretation in our heads of who Superman is. So actually putting one on the screen that makes everyone happy, that's incredibly difficult. Whereas the MCU, Iron Man at the time was not at all comic accurate. Hawkeye's not comic accurate. Black Widow's not comic. None of these characters are comic accurate at all. Maybe they grew to transition more towards comic accuracy, and the comics themselves changed the characters so that they were more similar to the live action adaptations.
Yeah.
But no one has any expectations for the MCU, or at least they didn't. Whereas in DC, if we see a Batman we don't like, it's like, oh, that's not my Batman. Like, there are people who don't like the Christian Bale Batman because he's not like enough of a ninja. There are people who don't like the Ben Affleck Batman because he's too angry, and it like these little things. And I like when it comes to Superman, yeah, true. But I mean, so is all of them. Like who was the first one? 1989. I always forget his name.
Michael Keaton.
He just threw like 2 guys off a building. Like he just killed them
casually. He stuffed a bomb down some guy's pants. Okay.
Yeah, and like and it's so easy to just like just put like, hey, let's just make a likable character. Like Tony Stark is an alcoholic, angry, like self-obsessed, egotistical, rich billionaire ass. Like that is who he is in the comics for so long. And then Tony Stark in the movies, he was like 1% of that, 99% charming and hilarious. Like you can just have these characters be whatever you want them to be because no one has expectations. If they came out with the X-Men, like a lot of people don't like Cyclops in the X-Men because he's not like the comics. Because people know what he's like in the comics. He's great in the comics. In the movies, he's just like this jealous boyfriend. And I am one of the people who hate that. I think that if the X-Men were to show up in the MCU, I would love to see James Marsden back. That character needs justice. Like they did an awful job with him. Then they just killed him off at the start of the third movie.
He's a good
Cyclops
actor.
is not that. And like I personally believe Cyclops is like he's like the Batman of the X-Men. Like he's their team leader. He's smart. He's athletic. He fights. He has hands. He just beats up Wolverine whenever Wolverine has an attitude. Like these are things that have happened. But like in the movies, he's just like, hey, are you talking to my girl? That's his entire character. Like that is his entire character. And people don't like that because we know what he's supposed to be. I think that firstly, DC needs to be put in the hands of someone who actually cares about the characters, which is why I was really happy with the Discovery purchase.
Kevin Smith.
I don't know about Kevin Smith. He's not doing well with He-Man right now. I have faith in Kevin Smith. I have more faith in Kevin Smith than I have in
I think the new guy they got, Yamamoto, I forget his name. What's the guy, the new dude that's in kind of like the Kevin Feige role at DC right now? Mario something?
Just from what he first said, I think that he said, hey, why are we not doing Superman? Like, where's Superman? That was one of the first like public statements.
You're talking about David Zaslav. He's the one that recently
the CEO.
He was the CEO of Discovery, which is crazy that they bought Warner Brothers. But yeah, I like that dude. But also the guy that they already had in place, I forget his name. His name always escapes me. Anyway, he seemed like he was starting to get him on the right track with Aquaman and Shazam. Even though I didn't love Shazam, Shazam was a good movie, and seemed like they were starting to go on to a better path. But the biggest problem with Warner Brothers is they try to meddle with the end project way too much. It's too much studio meddling.
Yep.
And when you get to the point of a Batman versus Superman, which could have been a good story, well, it's not a good story anymore because why we had to force in this crap version of Lex Luthor. And I've talked about this thousands of times on the show, but they tried to cram in too many storylines. The death of Superman. Let's also put in Doomsday. Like they tried to put in too much crap in that film. And what do you get? A jumbled up mess. You should have.
And I kind of feel like that's
BVS.
Yeah, like I kind of feel like that's where Marvel's heading. And I think that this is something that happens in the comics a lot. Like,
that's right.
You start off any reboot and it's just like a straightforward, you read each comic, whichever one you like, and that's fine. And then the first crossover happens and every comic book has a tie-in. Then the second crossover happens and things happen in that comic book that affect everything else. Like it just gets so messy and muddled. 3 years in, it's impossible for you to actually pick up a comic book because you have to know what happened in this event and that event and that event to actually understand why the characters are where they are now. Even looking at the timeline, it's like in the first 10 years of the MCU, there were like 2.5 phases, 3 phases with like 26 films. From 2019 to 2025, we're gonna have 3 phases, so that's 6 years with 3 phases, so 2 years for each phase. With I don't know, like what is it, like 40 projects, including like the TV shows and the movies. We have Avengers. What is it? The Kang Dynasty, which I think they're gonna. I think change that name just because like the Kang Dynasty. I don't know, like that. It's very Infinity War Part 2. We have the Kang Dynasty coming out in May 2025, and then Secret Wars coming out 6 months later. Like they're stuffing so much. I think that it's diminishing returns because we all believe that like one of these like each of these shows, it's gonna have like a little piece of the puzzle. So like we have to consume everything that they put out because we don't want to miss out on some potential important fact. And they're basically saying, yeah, exactly. Like it's just so much. And to the point where I'm just like sitting here and I'm like, do I even want to watch this? Or do I feel like I have to so that I get what's going on in the movie, so that I get that little tiny Easter egg after Secret Wars? If they decide to just have like a full reboot, I wouldn't be mad at that. I wouldn't. I think that, or at least if they just decided to, and the reason that I like the Secret Wars storyline so much is that it streamlined the Marvel comics, something that they hadn't done in a very long time, like 60 years. They actually streamlined it. And I'm hoping that they do that with Secret Wars. I'm hoping that we get some sort of like slowdown because there's just so much content being thrown in our face. Like, let's relax. Like, let's relax a little bit. I hope that, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but I hope that one of the unannounced Phase 6 movies is some sort of Midnight Suns show, because I don't see where Moon Knight can fit in. Like, what one of the, like, I don't see them bringing back Moon Knight. There's rumors of a Ghost Rider, and I want them to like
Blade.
establish like a mythical world, like with Blade as well. Like I think that that's something that they're missing out on. Also, when it comes to how the multiverse has been dealt with so far, the reason I'm a little on edge about it is because I haven't been a fan of it. Like, the introduction of it, I think that it was just messy. We had What If, and you watch What If, and you're like, okay, this is how the multiverse is introduced. Then you watch WandaVision, and you're like, okay, this is how the multiverse is introduced. Then you watch Loki, and you're like, okay, this is like, every single one of them felt like each show was leading up to like, whoa, multiverse origin story, and the only one that really did that was Loki. So it just feels like, and I don't know if you guys have, like, there's this woman, she posted this video talking about the time that these shows were filmed and why it feels like nothing is moving forward. It's because like all of these shows were filmed within like a year and a half. Like every single one of these projects that are going to be released in the next 2 years were all filmed at around the same exact time. There were overlapping film schedules. Like I think Miss Marvel, that show was being filmed like the last 2 episodes at the end of like WandaVision's premiere. They don't actually have the years of space in between to actually move forward in the timeline, because like they're technically not, like they're all existing within the same space, which is why I feel like the next season of all of these shows are going to be incredible. I really have faith in that season 2 of all of these shows are going to be a huge step up from season 1, because they're actually going to be able to tell a story without having to worry about world building. And they're going to take some criticism from the fans, because that's something that I can respect Kevin Feige for. He has responded to fan criticism and backlash in a very reasonable way. So I have faith.
We'll see how things go. Talk to me again. This is what I always tell a lot of people. Talk to me again in 3 years, because right now, hey, Kevin Feige, I'm on your side, buddy.
I like Kevin.
He
I
doesn't
like
let
him.
us
He's
astray.
great.
And he's
Oh,
also
hero,
gonna be casting
Jonathan.
Danny as the new Molecule Man in the MCU. You know that, right, Tim Collins?
Yeah, sure.
It's possible. No, I
It's-
doubt it.
hey.
It's a joke. It's just a joke. But
Hey, anything's possible.
Confirmed here. Comic Book Cinema reports it first. Danny O'Mani is going to be the new Molecule Man in the MCU. So, guys,
that'd be cool, but doubtful. But that'd be awesome.
that's like an ongoing joke on his TikTok. He always makes videos about talking about, yeah, so I had a conversation with Kevin the other night over dinner.
Of course.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's
It's
a little
awesome.
overdone, but it's a lot of fun. So,
Guys, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see how things go. You know, I think that right now Marvel's on the right path, but you never know. Things could get even worse. I mean, we have had a few little rough patches here and there, so we'll see if it's sustainable. You guys want to plug your socials?
Yeah, without question. I'm at Esoc on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. Provide social commentary, a little bit of social commentary, geek culture stuff, and also if I'm creating a new collaborative TikTok page. It's at Geek Talk, where I'm gonna have a couple different content creators across the space, and we're all gonna come together and contribute to this. I want to call it a news, a Geek Talk news format. I'm working on it, and I think that it's gonna be great. It's gonna be launching August 9th. I've got 3 creators on already. And I really think you guys should check that out. Other than that, I'm happy to be on here. I really appreciate coming on, and it was great to meet you guys.
Mr. Danny?
yeah, I'm Danny O'Mani, 1978 on TikTok. On Instagram, I'm Danny_O'Mani. On YouTube, it's Too Money 40 Film Society. It's not a very big channel, and it's just like I said, it's got some short films on it and things like that, some larger projects that I've worked on. But yeah, hopefully you guys can check out my content. I just like that, like I do on my TikTok. That's mainly where I hang out. I just like to have a good time with cosplay, comedy, Marvel, just action figure, pretty light. So just if you want to come check it out sometime for a good time, that'd be awesome.
Heck yeah, guys. And as always, you can check us out on YouTube. You're already here. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Real Comic Book Cinema. You can also find us on Facebook. Guys, until next time, have a good one.